so poignant. How do you address that? I know at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, sometimes footage that was, traumatic for people to view, they would have displays where you would look down instead of seeing it. So I'm just curious, since there was so much recorded video, how are you addressing that at the museum?
It's an excellent question, and it's something that since the beginning of this process we've focused on. In fact, our museum director comes from the Holocaust Museum. She was there through its gestation and then its implementation, Alice Greenwald. And the parts of material that are the most sensitive, we will absolutely be warning or providing advance notice to people. We'll be providing ways to go around that. One of the legacies of 9/11 that many people saw, I happened to be there outside the North Tower on that day and saw myself firsthand, but the story of people jumping is a perfect example of, that's a choice that people were faced with 1,000 feet in the air to do the unimaginable. On the one hand, it is so graphic, it's so hard to process. On the other hand, it is an absolute part of the truth of what happened on that day. So we are going to be presenting the sensitive material, but we're going to do it in a way that clearly lets people who don't want to see it go around it.
You talked earlier about how the world came together when 9/11 happened, and I'm just wondering how you envision, either through naturally occurring things with the opening of the museum or maybe some outreach that you're going to be doing, how do you think there's an opportunity to bring that kind of situation and feeling back?
I think the answer is it's certainly our objective, and I think just in the visitation that we've seen so far, for visitors coming from overseas, when they come here, it's become a pilgrimage. It's become an absolute place that they want to go to. So I think just by its very nature that, it was called Ground Zero for the bad reasons of what happened there, but this is going to be now associated with the spot that brings the world together. Certainly we're going to reinforce that message in the museum by putting the exhibits on that show that the spontaneous vigils that happen not only in this country but around the world, people pouring out in the streets. And it's to remind people that while that unity didn't last, and inherent in our society perhaps it shouldn't last, the fact that we know it's there when we need it is an important message, and that's going to be a pretty significant focus of the museum. I think we have time for one more, I'm being told.
Oh, yes.
I certainly think that it'll definitely be televised, and we've seen commemoration ceremonies come over the years. This one will be one of the biggest. Just anecdotally, we're hearing from family members that, whether at one time they might have brought a brother or sister, this time they're bringing all the cousins. This is the moment that, for families particularly, and on that day it is just for families, when they step onto the memorial and go up for the first time and touch the name of their loved one, it's going to be a pretty emotional event. It will certainly be covered by television, and I think all the work that everyone's put in, particularly Michael, in coming up with that, from that one sketch in October of 2001 to this day that's coming in 74 days, everyone's going to be invited in to witness it, at least through TV.
There were many street memorials and pictures at hospitals where no one went. And I was wondering, do you have photographs to present of those scenes as well?
Absolutely. I mean, those particular photographs, seeing the doctors and the orderlies in their blue scrubs lined up outside of St. Vincent's, waiting for people that didn't come because there wasn't that many injuries, and the spontaneous, most heartbreaking, touching notes that were left at firehouses, just on fences, fence posts. That's the missing posters that people wrote on. All that stuff is part of the collection and tells the story at such a human level. It is absolutely going to be a part of the museum. It really tells a lot of the story, so yes.
Most of us are cultural workers in this room, so many of us would be interested to know what kind of collaborations, if any, that you would be interested in engaging with us to help commemorate this year and in the future. Thank you.
I think we very much encourage this idea of institutions around the city, around the country, we get calls all the time about how to commemorate. I think it's, you know, it's making available to your visitors on that day an acknowledgement of what the day is, that this is the anniversary, this is the time that the memorial is opening, and the messaging that this is, you know, we saw the worst of humanity on that day, but it's also the time when we saw the best of humanity, and that could take many forms, whether you do a moment of silence during that day. It happens to be a Sunday this year, 9/11/11. So I think there's a large opportunity, and we want to engage, particularly because we know that while the event and the commemoration ceremony itself this year is for families, we want and we know people around the world are going to be thinking about it. So it's really relying on families, other institutions to mark that day in any way that is respectful.
As you planned for the museum, what was the most difficult aspect in determining the mission of the museum?
That's a hard last question, I have to say. It's fundamentally, we know that preserving the history of what happened is, you know, that starts at the core, that this is about, it's a museum on the very site where this atrocity took place, and that level of sensitivity and the way it guides decision-making is something that we've been conscious of in the beginning. As a history museum, it's about preserving the history, what happened on the day, why it happened, and then what does it mean. We have this tremendous opportunity that we're doing this event, and we're doing this, this museum at a time when many of those who went through it, who experienced it, are still here. So to get that authentic documentation, the oral histories, to use the authentic artifacts, it's a tremendous responsibility, but it's also provides such rich content to convey the messages of what happened, of how we came together. I think long-term, beyond the preservation of history, this is the opportunity, whether it's through programming, which we will have, whether it's through temporary exhibition space, which we've built in, is to understand that since we're going to have this built-in audience that is coming from around the world, what do you do with that? How do you educate? How do we reinforce the messages of, you know, what was it about America or about this society that led to this attack? All the implications that are very complicated is certainly the long-term aspiration to address. Thank you very much.
It's not so much what happens to one that one is judged, it's how one responds. And I would have to say that the way Joe and Michael and Kate and your teams have responded to this is something that we, as New Yorkers and certainly as Americans, should be proud of. So enjoy your very patriotic weekend. Thank you for coming. We have a reception waiting for you outside. Thank you.